There is something I always try to say to my clients when I am establishing a relationship with them and how I view my role and how I help them with their babies. And what I say to them is this: you are the expert of your body and your baby. And I am the expert on all things lactation. So I do have expertise that I bring to the table. And I am going to help you make the next right steps as you are trying to resolve your feeding difficulties with your baby. However, I have not been getting to know your baby for even the minutes and the hours and the days. So if I'm seeing you in the first few days, you still have so much more time with your baby than I have. There is no way that I can care for your baby more than you do. So you are way more invested in making this work or in figuring out a plan that works for both you and your baby than I am. However, sometimes when you are dealing with either a lactation professional or somebody else in the healthcare field who is not viewing you as the expert of your baby, you might be left feeling less effective at parenting than you should be. And I came across some interesting ideas about this that I would like to share. So let's get into it. This is something that I have been doing for a while as I have grown as a lactation helper. Now, did I start out this way? I'm sorry to say no. I think often when I first started out, like many people, I was so passionate about human milk feeding and about breastfeeding that I would come in and I would know all the answers and I would do a lot of talking and try to change this position and that position right away. And sometimes I still do that when I see that somebody is really suffering, and I forget to slow down and do a lot of listening and figure out what the person that I'm working with has already learned or what they're most interested in learning and figuring out. Because sometimes if there's a complex situation, we really just need to work on one thing at a time. The role of the lactation professional and anyone working with parents is to build self-efficacy. And I've used this term a lot in the last few years. And it turns out it is a real term in the lactation world, and it has an acronym, BSE, breastfeeding self-efficacy. And it describes the level of confidence parents have in their ability to meet their nursing goals. And so a high or low BSC explains why some families nurse or don't nurse, and why some persevere in spite of serious challenges or decide to choose another feeding method. In Nancy Moorbacher's book, Breastfeeding Answers, A Guide for Helping Families, there was a research study done that concluded that lactation helpers can either boost or increase someone's self-efficacy. And this was no surprise to me at all. But then it turns out that according to a 2017 systemic review and meta-analysis of a lot of research studies, that this breastfeeding self-efficacy can be modified. And there are strategies that can either boost a person's feeling of self-efficacy to help lengthen nursing duration, or it can be tampered. And so that's really important for you to know as a person who is feeding your baby, that if you are interacting with someone and they're making you feel worse about feeding your baby, if they walk away and you feel more overwhelmed than you did before, you can actually stop and think to yourself, wait a minute, maybe they're taking an approach that actually is decreasing my feelings of self-efficacy right now, and they are not making me feel like I am the expert of my baby. Or if you are a lactation professional, you might be tuning into this podcast right now and be thinking, what is my approach? Because it's not you who has to go home and feed babies. I mean, feed your clients' babies at least. So you really do want to be taking approaches that builds the self-efficacy of your clients, even though you are an expert in your field. Do you know what else can build your self-efficacy as a parent in general, or at least can bring more calm to your life? Meditation. On episode 95 of the Milk Making Minutes, Kelly Smith, founder of Meditation Mama, told her breastfeeding journey of exclusively pumping and how having a strong meditation practice helped her be okay with the decisions that she was making in motherhood. So if you are looking for a way to find more calm and more peace in your parenting journey, regardless of how you feed your baby, I highly recommend you check out the Meditation Mama podcast. And so it turns out that when you look at the qualitative study by Burns, Fenwick, Sheehan, and Schmid in 2013, conducted in publicly funded hospitals in 2 different areas of Australia. And what they did was they recorded conversations between healthcare providers, that was mostly midwives and lactation consultants, and breastfeeding mothers. And the researchers used a research analysis technique called discourse analysis, in which they slowed down the conversations and tried to more clearly understand the assumptions underlying the interactions. And they found that the healthcare providers primarily focused on lactation help were using one of 2 basic approaches. And when I saw this, the 2 approaches, it did not surprise me at all because I feel like I see this all the time in my work as a lactation professional when I interact with other lactation professionals. But I want you, if you have interacted with lactation professionals, or if you yourself are a lactation professional, I want you to think about which camp you would put yourself in. So, approach 1 is helper as the expert, and approach 2 is mother as the expert. For the helper as the expert, about 80% of the healthcare professionals fell into this camp, and only about 9% of the study professionals fell into the second approach. But it was based on this approach. There was a totally different set of underlying assumptions there. They viewed the mother as the experts on their baby and their own needs. So, the top priority, and you see this in hospitals all the time, the top priority in approach 1 was nutrition, getting milk into the baby. And the perception of the mother was that she was a novice. She needed to be trained in the mechanical process of feeding her baby. She was a milk machine. And you often hear parents say this, I just feel like a cow, especially if they're using a pump. They also often attribute any problems being had to the baby's personality. So the baby's being very stubborn or they're being very lazy, as if the baby is making a conscious decision to be difficult when it comes to baby feeding. They view their role as like an overseer, making sure that the parent who is feeding the baby is getting it right. And that they are doling out expert advice and information that must be taken in so that this parent can feed their baby. And it's thought to be very important. And they often ask close-ended questions. So, questions where the parent either answers yes or no. And then they give lots of information dumps. So, they're going to say lots of information with no opportunity for the feeding parent to respond. Often, these helpers turn very quickly to lactation tools such as pumps and nipple shields, especially if nursing isn't immediately successful. And the people being treated by these helpers often describe their help as intrusive, and they say that their interactions are more undermining than supportive. And these parents often feel a little bit invisible. They feel like the help is really focused on the baby and not on the parent. But we know that baby feeding is a dyad. And that's one of the reasons that I always say to the feeding parent, you matter. Don't ignore your pain. If you are in pain, believe that. If somebody tells you the latch looks quote unquote fine, but it doesn't feel fine, you should speak up again and again until somebody believes you. Okay. So the helpers that believed or had the underlying assumption or treated the parents as if they were the expert, their top priority was the relationship between the mother and the baby. And so they viewed the helper and the family as an equal partnership. So the perception of the mother was that she was the expert of her baby and her own needs, and that she was in need of support to get those needs met. What an interesting difference between a novice who just needed all this information dumped on her. The perception of the baby or the babies was that their baby behaviors were normal and that any struggles that the baby is having are part of the early learning process and that there is a learning curve and that the baby's still going to get it and there's still a chance for the baby to get it. And they viewed their role, these helpers in the second category who viewed the mothers as experts, they viewed their role as somebody who reframed any negative interpretations of the experience, and they were there to support the family to do it their way. And in order to do this, they asked a lot of open-ended questions. There were a lot of two-way conversations, and they customized the suggestions via careful listening. So I had an Instagram reel this week from my latest podcast episode with a guest, which is with Amy Fletcher. And she talked about getting this really standard advice from a lactation consultant who told her because she was struggling with milk supply, or at least perceived milk supply with her second baby, due to a very stressful work situation, she told her just to have a nurse in all weekend. She said she was pretty sure that she never asked her if that was possible. Her husband worked weekends. She had an older toddler. There was no way she could have just laid in bed all day and nursed her baby to increase her supply. And the difficulty was really while she was at work. But this lactation consultant never bothered to really dig in to get to know more about her personal situation to know. And so she was just giving standard advice that she gave everybody. But if you don't ask open-ended questions, or if you're not being asked open-ended questions, then of course you're just going to get advice that you could get on Google anyway. And so I urge you, if you are looking for somebody who views you as the expert of your baby, but also has their set of expertise and can bring it to you and help you build your self-efficacy when it comes to feeding your babies. To not be afraid to say, you know what, this person is not working out for me. And if you are looking for someone who is going to come into a situation already viewing you as the expert of your baby and of your body, I would love to be the person who provides the lactation support and lends you my expertise as an IBCLC. So you can find all of my information on my website at www.quabandbirthservices.com. I can often bill your insurance. I can meet with you in person if you're in Massachusetts near me, or virtually all over the world. And I would love to be the person who helps you build your own self-efficacy. Hope to talk to you soon.